Hi, my name is Chris. I'm the author of Spiritual Polyamory and 4 other books that I published under the name Mystic Life. And I wanted to share some thoughts about polyamory, married and dating on Showtime, Season 2. I've watched half the season so far, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I was hoping that they would change the title of the program this season to just polyamory, because married and dating tends to give a skewed view of what polyamory is. You don't have to be married. You can be single. It doesn't matter. It's a philosophy. And I think that currently a lot of poly people are in a transitional state between the old paradigm of a couple-centric kind of view, moving towards what I think is the only way you can really do polyamory effectively, which is finding your individual wholeness and being centered so that other people that you care about can be themselves without you trying to restrict them. Now, that is not the case, and if you watch the show, it's focused on conflict, like most entertainment. And so they would not necessarily benefit from casting people who were completely at peace with themselves to the point where they can allow other people to do what they want. I think that everyone in the show is working towards that on some level, but they're not there yet, and so there's going to be conflict. And that is one of the main lessons of polyamory. Wherever you place restrictions on another person, that's where you're going to find drama. That's where you're going to find conflict. In other words, creating rules and structure and limitations that are based on trying to limit your feelings of jealousy are going to lead to suffering. And ultimately, jealousy is so common because from the time we're kids, we get the message that your jealousy is someone else's problem. Your jealousy is someone else's responsibility. And so therefore, their behavior is what needs to be controlled. And so this leads to monogamy, in that your partner who you care about has to only have eyes for you, or they are wrong, they are bad, and you should leave them. And polyamory is questioning that underlying concept. A lot of people are realizing that, yeah, it might feel nice for your ego to limit another person, but ultimately, if somebody puts the cookie jar on top of the refrigerator, you will risk breaking your neck to climb up there to get that cookie, because we have a natural impulse towards wanting to have what is naturally desirous if it doesn't hurt anybody else. So jealousy is really the underlying drama that you'll see in this show. I'll go through and talk about this program in terms of each of the people who are featured within it. I'll start with the San Diego group, who is featured in Season 1 as well. They are continuing on. I first wanted to say that if they are in Season 3 as well, I would like to suggest that they don't have to keep some confidentiality clause. My understanding is that they couldn't talk about it before it was officially announced that they were going to be in Season 2. And I just find that really restrictive, to tell polyamorous people that they have to withhold and lie if asked directly about something. So let them just be open about it. It fits the energy of the program, and it's not going to decrease viewership. I personally kind of like the idea of an ongoing group that is followed over time, so one can see the long-term effects of their growth and their experiences, and then introducing another group who is new and fresh. And I wanted to say as well that I think it is, in terms of finding some new group to focus upon, it is very restrictive to only find people who are willing to have themselves filmed having sex naked. And not everyone's an exhibitionist. And so in order to broaden the scope of potential applicants to the program, you might want to remove that. Because watching, softcore porn in and of itself, it's not to me, really the essence of polyamory. And there are many places you can see porn at various levels, and it doesn't really matter, if you focus upon that in this show. To me, the interesting element is the human relationships and the communication and the growth that these people are undertaking. So that's my thought on that. So starting with the San Diego group, I think that Kamala is really a conscious person. She's good communication skills. In the most recent episode, she agreed to a threesome because Michael, her husband, he kept talking about how the way to achieve greater emotional depth is through, group sex. And that's not the only way, but that is a way that he likes. And I don't find that to be the case, really. I think that if you're going to be intimate with more than one person, there needs to be a pre-established kind of connection. It's not the sex that deepens our connections. Sex is a natural outcome of our connections. So because there's a certain kind of fantasy element to threesomes, you can get fixated and tell yourself this is the way. But my sense, and this is just my projection, is that Kamala, being an empath, sensed Michael's desire for a threesome, agreed to it, but once it began, she didn't really feel excited or congruent and wanted to switch it more towards just cuddling and building intimacy on that level. So I think this is an important concept to keep in mind, is that if you are agreeing to something that involves sexuality, really tune in and make sure that it's something you're doing for yourself and not for someone else, because things can get pretty complicated when you're involving sexuality. And ultimately, threesomes, foursomes, it's not a necessary component of polyamory. This makes for good TV, basically. People know what it's like when two people are together. And so there is a fantasy component of watching other people have sex with more than one person at the same time. But, I find personally there's only a charge to it if you haven't done it. And after that, it's not that big of a deal. So it's not really inherently interesting in and of itself. So I think that the sexual component of the show, it tries to use the titillation to get people to view it who are excited by things like that. But again, I'm more interested in the relationships going on. And speaking of relationships, Tahl and Jen are another couple in the San Diego group. And my sense is that Jen gets easily triggered, and then Tahl feeds in. And there's been moments in both season 1 and season 2 where they're like, fuck you, and just, it's a little uncomfortable for me to watch, because I like to think that if you're going to engage in polyamory, there has to be a kind of deep compassion and love and understanding. And I feel that there's kind of what Eckhart Tolle would call a unresolved pain body that's pretty strong, especially in Jen. In the most recent episode, she got very angry at Tahl for not cleaning up the bedroom after having sex, but he had just finished having sex. And, it's not like he was going to leave condoms on the floor forever and so forth, but she got upset and was saying kind of degrading things to him in front of his lover. But I have a feeling that he's kind of impish, and from my perspective, he kind of enjoys having a scolding mommy figure a little bit there. And I think that because he takes things lighter in general, that's part of the draw for Jen, because she seems very serious about things. And so his lightness, unbearable lightness of being, if you will, is appealing within Tahl. But the incident of them having this conflict, and again, I don't know if the show would exist without conflict, because most people, I personally would enjoy watching people getting along, but most people are bored by that. They need conflict to be entertained. But this incident showed that wherever you create rules, you create conflict. And so my belief is that ultimately, if you want to be at peace, you have to let go of attachments. You have to let go of what other people do and stop believing that you have a right to control their behavior because you feel insecure. You can process your feelings. You can, express that you're uncomfortable if something comes up for you, and you can ask for what you want. But ultimately, it all comes back towards letting go. And I hope, that everyone in the show is moving towards that. But sometimes the way it's edited, at least, it seems that there's a lot of focus upon what other people can and cannot do. And I just think that's residue of the whole monogamous old paradigm thinking that is not really what polyamory is heading towards. Jen is dating a younger guy who sees himself as monogamous, and he's okay with her having sex with her husband but not other men. Now, she seems to be highly attracted to him, in part because of his youth, and this is something she's willing to compromise with, and I find for myself that that would not be appealing. When there is a strong physical attraction, sometimes people are willing to compromise, but I've gotten to the point on my own poly path where if somebody wants me to limit myself and limit how I express love, that is not appealing to me and would not be a turn on, would not make me, feel aroused or drawn to such a person. So I'll be surprised if that lasts a long time. That is not really, generally speaking, a sustainable model within polyamory of limiting yourself in any way. But a lot of people do it. A lot of people they want to have a triad or some other polyfidelitous closed system. So that is an interesting experiment. We'll see how it goes during the last 4 shows of this season. And speaking of closed systems, the Hollywood group, Chris, Leann, and Megan, they seem to have a traditional triad. It was revealed in episode 4 that Chris and Leann had been with a couple before. It sounded like a swinging kind of situation where they're all together, still couple-centric. So not total one penis policy, or OPP as the poly community refers to it, but mostly a very couple-centric kind of relationship. And this is another example of when you put a rule on something, you're going to have that break. Any kind of restriction leads to tension. About 15 years ago or so, maybe longer than that, the first time I was introduced to polyamory was a woman who I had an affair with before I was poly, obviously, or I wouldn't be lying and having an affair. She was poly, and in her primary relationship, there was a rule that there was one guy she could not be with, which was a mutual friend of theirs, a guy that they live with. And I found out, a year or 2 later that she had been carrying on an affair with him. And by that point, I was already into polyamory when I found this out, and I felt kind of disillusioned. But that she would be lying, that I didn't know that she wasn't being completely honest. But the experience taught me that when there is that restriction, when there is anybody but this person, it naturally focuses your attention towards that person. Because underneath all these restrictions is an underlying understanding that love does not operate from a place of fear. And so any kind of restrictions that arise from fear are going to not really jive on a deeper level. They're not going to be aligned with your true self. So a lot of times that's the best way to ruin a relationship, is tell another person what they cannot do. And you shouldn't buy into that. If you are told this is what you cannot do, I would suggest saying, this is not why I was drawn to polyamory. I was not drawn to polyamory to be treated like a child that cannot, get the cookie. So with Chris and Leann and Megan, Leann cheated on Chris and on Megan, and Chris and Megan were both very upset. And it's really yet to be clear as to how that's going to resolve itself. Leann is going to have the other Chris from Chicago visit her, and I don't think that it was just about anger. I don't think it was just about revenge about Chris and Megan. From my perspective, I sense that Leann did not want to be in a closed polyfidelitous situation, and so instead of talking about it openly, about expanding and being with another man, she felt that that would not go over well perhaps, and so therefore she just decided to cheat. And that answers a question that a lot of poly people ask in forums and so forth: can polyamorous people cheat? And the answer is yes. Anyone can cheat, anyone can lie and be deceptive and so forth, and it causes a lot of, mistrust and damage in a relationship if you do that. So I sense that Chris wants to be back with Leann, but his ultimatum that she has to end the relationship with Chris in Chicago, the other Chris, is not probably going to work too well if she has true feelings for this other guy. And we shall see how that unfolds. But I think that Chris's accusation that Chicago Chris is a jerk because what kind of a sleazeball would do that? I don't think he fully understands. I don't think Leann has told him yet at this point that it seems that Leann has misguided her lover as to how open her relationship is. And this is something I've witnessed before. Other people do. They can be a little bit misleading if they're poly. And, I haven't seen it a lot, but, for people who are not willing to be completely open with their partner yet, they can say, oh yeah, we have an open relationship. It's fine if you and I are together and so forth. But they haven't really committed fully to being honest with their other lovers. And that's not polyamory. That is just cheating. Now, one of the things I find sad in the Hollywood triad is that Megan was expressing that if Chris and Leann get back together and she doesn't want to be with Leann, then she has to leave Chris as well. And that's, part of this whole couple-centric thing, that she's dating a couple. And so therefore she would have to suppress her feelings for Chris, who she seems to really connect with well and love, because she has to date both the people. So if she doesn't want to date one, she cannot date the other. And this, again, is, from my perspective, old paradigm thinking. And it just goes back to the idea that if you are not willing to let go of the whole couple type thinking, then you're going to have suffering in your life. It's really healthy, I believe, to see yourself as a whole individual. Not many people get there, ever, because their socialization and their inner fears and insecurities are so strong that it's all about trying to complete yourself through another person. So even within polyamory, you can feel like, oh, I need to have a primary partner, and to keep this primary partner, there have to be rules and restrictions as to what they can and cannot do. But that is the greatest irony, is the rules and restriction are what causes the problem. So when stuff comes up for you, recognize if you want to be poly, you have to work on yourself. You have to get whole. Maybe you need to take some time alone. And that's something a lot of people never ever do when they go from one relationship to another. They never get comfortable with who they really are. And I believe that that is ultimately what it's all about, is growing and healing and working on yourself in a way that really allows you to get to the point where you can love people unconditionally. Because it's not in our impulse to murder and steal and lie and do other kinds of very unempathic, horrendous things, but it is in our nature to love and to be sexual and to be intimate and to be close. So we have to separate what are good reasons to leave somebody from what are good reasons to work on ourselves, because they're very different things. The reasons that people leave people currently, leave their relationships, don't just involve inherently bad things. Don't just involve, abusive partners who are horrible, or people that are untrustworthy and so forth. They also include the reason of this person loves someone else, and I should be special, and I should be the primary focus in their life. So I say, get rid of labels. See yourself as who you are. See others as who they are. Everybody is an individual, and where there's overlap, there can be love and intimacy and so forth. But if you try to force things, you're not going to probably have success in the long run. You might have temporary sense of security for your ego, but it's all about letting go. And that's why I look at polyamory from the spiritual perspective of this is a way you can increase your personal growth and your spiritual growth by seeing what triggers you and where did that come from? What is unhealed? Is there stuff from your family of origin that still needs to be dealt with? Why don't you feel whole? Why don't you feel completely in love with yourself to the point where you can love other people as they are? So those are my thoughts on the show and related thoughts. So thanks for listening.